What about if the money runs out? Or what about if we just don't get another client like this? What about if this client was a one-off? What about if it was a fluke? And these are all ways of thinking. These are all beliefs that we have around money that hold us back. Think about what you could do creatively if the next project you worked on had an extra zero on the end of their budget. What would you do differently? Who might you bring onto that project that you wouldn't have brought on before? So we see all of these ways in our business where money is actually constraining us. A lot of people think that the more money you have, the more stress you have. But actually, in a lot of cases, I found that's not true. Because the more money you have, the more space you can create for yourself. And therefore, the less stress you have. I'm going to give you some practical ways that you can attract more money into your business. So let's start with this piece. Hey, it's Matt Essam here, and welcome to another episode of the Creative Courage Podcast. Today, I want to talk to you about money. Now, I know that's a little bit of a controversial topic, and you might not be that interested in talking about money, especially if you're creative, because I know when I jump on calls with people and I ask them what they want and I ask them to imagine their ideal life, one of the phrases I hear a lot is, it's not about the money, right? Or I don't want to be a millionaire. I just want, and then insert the thing that they want. And I find this really interesting. So over the past 4 or 5 years, I've had hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands, I've lost count, of conversations with creative business owners. And I always ask them the question, whether it's a coaching client or whether it's somebody I'm figuring out whether I can help them, I always ask them this question: what do you want? What does an ideal life look like? What does an ideal business look like? And so I've heard this concept over and over again, and I've addressed it quite a few times privately with people and within these conversations, but I don't talk about it a lot publicly. And the main reason for that is because people have a lot of preconceptions and a lot of triggers around money. And I certainly don't want to become the money guy, the money mindset guy, right? But I do think it's really important to have a conversation about this. And I've been hearing it more and more recently. So I thought it'd be appropriate to do a podcast episode about it. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of people that I've spoken to regarding money and ways that I believe that their thinking is currently preventing them from having more of it or from attracting it more easily into their life and business. And then I'm going to give you some practical ways that you can attract more money into your business. Now, I know I'm sort of in danger here of becoming this kind of the secret sort of manifestation, manifest the money you want into your life. But this is coming from a place of real experience. And so about 6 or 7 years ago, my business wasn't really making any money. And the reason it wasn't really making any money was for multiple reasons, but one of them was because I really had the belief that people would not pay me to just speak to them. And I'd built a marketing agency where I was doing very sort of tangible work for people. I was building websites, we were managing their social media accounts, we were designing things for them. And I basically closed that down to become a life coach. And so I really, really struggled with this idea that people would pay me to just talk to them. And I also really struggled with this idea that I found talking to people really easy, and I seem to have a knack for being able to articulate people's problems in a way that really resonated with them or made them think about those problems differently. And so I really had to overcome my own money beliefs and money mindset blockers. And I'm definitely not perfect today. I still have some. But what was fascinating for me is that although my skills have improved over the years, I'm not an exponentially better coach. Like, I'm not a 10x better coach than I was 6 or 7 years ago, but I charge 10 times what I charge then, right? So I find that really fascinating. And I also find it really fascinating that I know other creatives, like one of my previous clients, Jay, has literally just had his documentary film accepted onto Amazon. So it's now available to watch on Amazon Prime. And I recorded a podcast with him probably 4 or 5 months ago now. And one of the things that he said was if I didn't know how to sell, and if I didn't address all of these kind of like mindset blockers around money and getting money, there's no way this film would have been made. And I see this so much for creatives. I see how their beliefs around money hold them back from doing more impactful work. And that is why I decided to record a solo episode on money today, because that is ultimately what this is about. It's not just about buying fancy watches, driving nice cars. If you want to do that, that's totally cool. If that's your thing, no judgment. But the reason I'm talking about it today, and the reason that I think money is an important conversation to have, is because it allows you to do more impactful work, and it allows you to have more impact for your clients. So I'll give you a tangible example. I was working with one client who felt really, really stuck in their business. They were super busy. They were working long hours. Their team was at capacity. And I said, look, there's a really simple fix for this, which is to raise your prices significantly. And they had a lot of reservation around that. And a lot of things came up for them. One of which was, I think we'll lose a lot of clients. And I said, okay, they were working with about 20 clients at the time. So quite a lot of clients, right? And I said to them, how many clients do you think you will lose? And they said, I reckon about 50%. So I said, okay, cool. Well, let's do the really simple maths on that. You double your prices, but you lose 50% of your clients. You are still generating the exact same amount of revenue, but you have 50% more capacity to work on your business, to give your team breathing space, to be more creative, to be less stressed. So you're actually creating from a place of abundance rather than stress and fear. So that's just one example. And they did do that. And they didn't lose 50% of their clients. They lost about 20% or 25%. And so actually that additional margin allowed them to bring on a few more team members and create capacity and increase revenue, right? So that was a kind of advantage for them. But in terms of the impact piece, think about what you could do creatively if the next project you worked on was the exact same deliverables, the exact same process that you go through, but it had an extra zero on the end of their budget. What would you do differently? How would you treat that project differently? Who might you bring onto that project that you wouldn't have brought on before? See, a lot of things I hear in relation to impact are, I would love a really good designer. I'd love a head designer, but I just can't afford them, right? So we see all of these ways in our business where money is actually constraining us. And so it stops us from having a bigger impact. It stops us from creating better work. It stops us from having more freedom. It stops us from having lower stress. A lot of people think that the more money you have, the more stress you have. But actually, in a lot of cases, I found that's not true, because the more money you have, the more space you can create for yourself, and therefore the less stress you have. So let's start with this piece. And what we're going to talk about today, like I said, first of all, is what are some of the limitations that are currently in place in your life and business as a result of not quite having the money that you want, or maybe not spending it in the way that you want? And then secondly, what can we do about it? So let me give you a few more stories and a few more examples just to illustrate some of these thinking patterns and some of these beliefs that might be relevant for you. So I was speaking to a client the other day, and again, she's incredible at what she does, and she works with some pretty big clients, but she's working crazy, like nonstop hours. And my suggestion usually is the same for people, is if you are very busy, so you have more people that want to work with you than you have capacity to deliver, the very simple thing to do is to raise your prices. And so we went through this whole conversation, and I coached her around what is coming up. What is the resistance that is coming up for you when I talk about raising your prices? And so what we got down to is this idea, this belief that she had around money, that if she was being ethical and she really was going to help people, she couldn't get paid a lot of money for that. That was her core belief. And it was really interesting because there was a client that came along that offered to pay her double what she's currently getting paid, and she turned it down. And I asked her why, and she said, I knew that would just create more stress for me. So she also had these underlying beliefs that if someone comes and pays way more money, they're going to be way more stressful, or they're going to demand way more. And a lot of these beliefs were subconscious. She wasn't really aware of them. She just believed that's how things were. Like, she was pretty convicted when she came at the beginning of that conversation. When she left, she had a different perspective because of some of the work that we did and some of the questions that we asked, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But that perspective shift really helped her to free up time and space, but more importantly, to have more impact with her work. So that's one example where somebody had resistance. Another example is I was talking to a client the other day. They run a 7-figure agency. They have clients that pay them 7 figures, and they were thinking about hiring. And they were thinking about hiring this team. And everybody in their team said, we need to hire this person. That founder felt unsure. He felt like, but what if this doesn't work out? What if the client pulls out? What if the economy goes down? Whatever it is, right? And so he was very reluctant, and he was looking at other ways to solve that problem without having to hire this person. And I said, are you making this decision from a place of fear or a place of abundance? And he said, fear. I was like, right, well, I know straight away that probably isn't a good decision, because if we're making decisions from a place of fear, then it's probably not a good decision. Right? So I said, what would this look like? What would the decision be if you were making this from a place of abundance? And he said, I would just make the hire. I was like, okay, great. So sounds simple, right? Okay, just make the hire. But what if all of these other things? Now, another client I was speaking to today, he has had a bit of a transformation in his business, and I'm going to invite him on the podcast in a couple of weeks, so you will actually hear that transformation. But one of the things that he said to me in that conversation was, when we first started working together, he was considering getting a job, and he was always worried, like, what happens if? Like, what happens if this doesn't work out? What happens if I can't get this client, et cetera, et cetera. And now today, he told me that he would never consider getting a job, because he knows that no matter what happens, he will work things out, and he will be able to sell, and he will be able to create clients. And even if this business doesn't work, he would be able to make another business work. And so that is making choices and coming from a place of abundance versus fear. This other person actually has a business that has more revenue and higher profit and a bigger team and bigger clients than this one that I just mentioned, right? But the first client, let's call him James. James is making decisions from a place of fear and scarcity. And so he will attract more of that. He will attract those kinds of clients who also make decisions from that place, who are also trying to cut corners and get things for the best price that they can. Whereas client number 2, let's call him Paul, he's attracting clients that are on the same frequency and vibration that he is. And he's okay to let go of people that aren't a good fit, because he knows the right fit clients will come along. Now, I know this is all kind of high level, and you're like, right, Matt, what's the point? What are you getting to? And I'm going to break this down about how it actually works. But I just wanted to give you some concrete examples, and maybe you can resonate with some of these. Maybe you can resonate with actually having money in the bank. Maybe you can resonate with having some good clients, but still feeling that sense of fear and that sense of scarcity and that sense of what if? And what about if the money runs out? Or what about if we just don't get another client like this? What about if this client was a one-off? What about if it was a fluke? And these are all ways of thinking. These are all beliefs that we have around money that hold us back. Now, I genuinely believe that if client number 1, I think I called him Paul, I can't remember now, Paul, right? Client number 1. I think if he changes those beliefs, he could have a multiple 7-figure business, but more importantly, he can feel better day to day. Because at the moment, he's stressed out and worried, like, is this the right decision? He's looking over his team all the time. He's feeling this kind of scarcity. He's feeling this kind of anxiety all the time. And that's not a great state to be in. Whereas this other client, he's maybe a little bit frustrated sometimes with the progress, or he's a bit pissed off or whatever, but the majority of the time he's living in flow and he's living in abundance. And so he may be earning less, but actually his well-being and his emotional state is way better. And I believe that the second client who's living in abundance will actually get to a better place long-term than the other one. And I see this all the time. I see people going backwards and forwards like yo-yoing, because they're constantly making decisions from a place of fear rather than a place of abundance. And so what can we do about it? And how do we know if this is us? And so there's a great exercise that I get a lot of my clients to do. And because these beliefs are often subconscious, it's really important to get them out of our head and down onto paper. So the question that I ask my clients in relation to money is, what does money mean, right? What does money mean for you? And people will come up with all different things. Then the second question, or the second exercise, should I say, I get them to do, is I just get them to write down somewhere on a piece of paper, money is, and then I just get them to list all of the things that come to their mind. Whether they think, oh, that's a bit stupid or that's not a bit stupid, just money is. Money is good. Maybe you were taught when you were a kid, money is the root of all evil. Money is for rich people, money is whatever. Like, and look at that list and see what comes up. And then read through that list and ask yourself, are there any beliefs there? Is there anything that comes up on that list that may be preventing you from building the kind of business that you really want to build, that may be preventing you from having the kind of impact that you really want to have? And if the answer is yes, then I would highlight those beliefs. Say, I do believe this about money. I really do believe that money is a limited resource and there's not a lot to go around. I really do believe that it's easy to run out of money. And once we run out, we're screwed. Right? Think about how those beliefs affect how you feel. Think about how those beliefs affect how you show up in the world, how you show up to sales calls, how you show up to team meetings, the decisions that you make in your business. Once we understand what those beliefs are and the what things that are holding us back, the question we need to now ask is, what would be a more helpful belief? Or if you can't think of a good answer to that, what is the opposite of that belief? Once we have that, what I encourage my clients to do is just try that belief on for a few weeks. And when I say try that belief on, what I mean is look at that belief and act and make decisions as if that belief were true, as if that were your new belief. Now, I know that's easier said than done, but it really is a simple case of when something happens, asking yourself, well, if I believed this, how would I behave? What would I decide? What would I say? What would I do? And just imagining going through the process. And the reason I say trying it on is because it's a little bit like a metaphor of, I don't know if you've ever changed your style or you've had a partner that's like, oh, I really like this on you. And you're kind of like, no, that's not my thing. But you maybe try it on for them anyway. And maybe they convince you to buy it. And you're like, oh, I don't know if this is really me. And then you're sort of walking around in this thing. And then people start coming up to you going, oh, I love this jacket. Oh, that really suits you, right? I know, for example, like in lockdown, my hair was thinning for quite a while. And in lockdown, the rage was like everyone was shaving their hair, right? Because you're not going out anywhere. It doesn't really matter. And so I shaved my hair and I took some photos and I sent it to some friends. And and I didn't think I was like, oh, I hate this. I hate the look of like being bald. But every single person that I sent it to said, oh, that really suits you. Like, oh, you look way younger when you've shaved your head. And I was like, really? And so then my belief about my appearance started to change because I just tried it on. I was like, what about if I believed that I look great with a shaved head? What about if I believed that I look better than I did before with a shaved head? How would that change how I act? Well, I'd probably be more confident. I'd probably be more smiley. I'd probably use my body in a way that was more confident. Therefore, I'd probably get more compliments, right? So this idea is the same around money. And so if you behave in a way that is opposite to that belief, so if your belief is, oh, there's not enough money to go around, and you swap that with, there's more than enough money to go around. Money is an infinite resource and it's available to me, and you behave like that, then your frequency and your behavior will be in alignment with that, which will then attract more of those things. And I said at the beginning of this, it's going to be a bit woo-woo. It's going to be a bit like The Secret, you attract what you put out, all of that kind of stuff. But I have found this to be true, not only in my own life, but when I've been coaching and working with clients. And I've found this to be true, that when people change their beliefs around money, it changes how money shows up in their life and in their business. And it's an incredible phenomenon to experience and to watch. So trying that on, and just when you act in alignment with that belief, just notice, is there any evidence to support this belief? And look for it, right? Your job when you try on a new belief is to look for the evidence. Is there any evidence that supports this new belief I have? And I always say to my clients, if you don't like this belief or it's not working out in the way that you want it to, 2 weeks isn't going to burn the world to the ground, right? Try it on for 2 weeks. If it doesn't feel like it's aligned or you aren't seeing any evidence, then you can always go back to your old belief. But you have to fully try it on. Like, you have to try these clothes on. You have to walk around with them in the world. You have to go to parties. You have to meet people. You have to go to meetings with these new clothes on, i.e. with this new belief. You have to behave in the way that this is true in order for this to work. If you just go, oh, I'm trying on this new belief, but you don't really believe it and you don't really behave in the way that you would if you did have that belief, then it doesn't work. So on a very practical level, it is quite easy. You do genuinely just decide. Like, just walk around and decide that you believe for 2 weeks that there is an abundance of money in the world and there's loads to go around, and getting money and receiving money is actually quite easy. And you're just going to act as if that's true. What would I do if I really genuinely believed that? What would I do? How would I change the way that I show up? What would I say no to? What would I say yes to? Where would I go? Who would I spend my time with? And just try it for a couple of weeks and see what happens. So that's this week's podcast about money. I really hope you found that valuable. And more importantly, I really hope that you actually take the time to do this exercise and to go through and write some of these things down, highlight the ones that you know probably are preventing you from having more of what you want or having the kind of business that you want, and then replace that with a new belief just for a few weeks. Try it on. What is that experience like? Look for the evidence and see what happens. I would love you to do that. And I would love you to reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know how that goes. Or maybe you've got a money blocker that you just haven't been able to overcome and you need some help and you'd like some help overcoming that. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. We can have a chat and see what we can do and what's possible. You've been listening to the Creative Courage Podcast. My name is Matt Essen, and I'll see you next week.